Hey, Southern Nevada, let's talk about your tap water. Despite its hard, mineral-rich taste, your water surpasses drinking standards, so don't confuse hard water with its quality. Sourced from the Rocky Mountains, your water is analyzed more than 328,000 times a year and treated and monitored 24/7 by a team of technical experts. Learn more about the testing of your water at snwa.com. SNWA is a not-for-profit water agency.
Earlier this year, the county levied some hefty fines on McKee Ranch, an animal sanctuary on the south end of town. The ranch operators say they think it's all the new housing being built next door that generated the complaints. And as developers look to the edges of Vegas for land to build on, this is just one example of how urban growth in our rural outskirts is starting to cause friction between new neighbors. Today on CityCast Las Vegas, reporter Patrick Blennerhassett from the Review-Journal joins the show to break down why, despite all that open desert, Vegas just might be running out of land. It's Tuesday, April 14th. I'm Sonia Cho Swanson, and here's what Las Vegas is talking about. Patrick, welcome to the show. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
It's great to have you. So, we mentioned the recent dispute involving McKee Ranch, where county enforcement actions and nearby residential development are kind of colliding, right? Mm-hmm. Are we seeing more of these conflicts as the housing demand expands?
Yeah, 100%. And I think the best place to start with this issue is you have to start at the macro level. And the macro level is no other city in America basically has the situation that we have. Salt Lake City, kind of, but any other major city or even smaller city like Phoenix in Arizona or any Sunbelt city, the federal government doesn't control any of their land within their sort of metro region. We are the complete opposite. The federal government controls basically all of the remaining land. So what you're seeing with sort of this development that you mentioned is that potential development, when it can go through, it's going through in very specific areas because that's the only place that the developers can get access to certain plots of land. The other land that's sort of just sitting there, I know if anybody drives through Las Vegas, they notice, what is that weird, just random plot of land beside a shopping mall that's not developed? That's most likely federal land. It's controlled by the Bureau of Land Management.
So you're talking about just like lots, like kind of almost like a patchwork of quilt-like patchwork of land within the city.
Yeah, I call them Tetris blocks. And so what happens and what you're seeing with sort of this dispute that you mentioned is that developers are trying to build where they can. So they're trying to build on county or municipal land that they can get access to because they can't get access to the federal land. One, because the feds aren't offloading it fast enough. And two, when they do, it's too expensive. So the home builders are trying to help us and trying to bring affordability by building more homes, but their backs are getting pushed up against the wall. And this is why you're seeing these types of disputes, is that they're being forced to try to develop land in places that the community might not necessarily think is the best option. Obviously, NIMBYism comes into this as well. This is a big issue too. But with Las Vegas's sort of housing crisis, you have to start with the federal control of land. There's just no other place to start for this conversation.
I actually had no idea because I know that about 85% of Nevada is federally owned land. And I knew that was true of the land sort of surrounding Las Vegas, almost like a deserty version of the green belt, right? That exists in other cities, like a sort of a brown belt, if you will. But I didn't know that those lots with kind of sort of within the city were also federally owned. Is that pretty widespread? Like how much of the land would you say within the city or within the valley?
Yeah, the most recent report we've got from this Eco Northwest, there's about 78,000 acres within sort of Metro Las Vegas Valley, Clark County, Southern Nevada, whatever terminology you want to use. And 23,000 of that is owned by the feds.
Wow.
And basically, the feds own all of the prime land because they've had it for so long and everybody's had to build up and develop all around them. I don't know if you want to take like a 5-second history tour of how we got here.
Always. Biggest history nerd, please, Patrick. I would love to learn.
When Nevada became part of the United States in the 1800s, all of sort of the emphasis was on northern Nevada because of the mining and the minerals and the ranching and all that stuff. So essentially what the state did was they made a deal with the feds to say, we want northern Nevada, you guys can have southern Nevada. Obviously, back then, nobody had any idea that they would start building a whole bunch of casinos in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
But fast forward to present day, basically Las Vegas was built up in and around federal land and on federal land. A lot of the casinos and developments that are in the Las Vegas Valley were built sort of via federal land exchange. So it presents a really weird sort of predicament for the Valley because we could probably solve our housing crisis tomorrow if the federal government, the BLM, came in and waved a magic wand and said, we don't want any of this land anymore. We're going to hand it over to the county and the municipalities. You would see this wave of housing development and commercial development that would take place, and home prices would just absolutely plummet. But that's not happening. So that's sort of where we are today.
Why not? Like, what are the biggest barriers to unlocking that land for housing?
And talking to the private sector, you know, both the residential and commercial side, they kind of say the same thing. It's just good old-fashioned bureaucracy. They passed the Land Management Act back in 1998 that was supposed to dispose of this land within the disposal boundary. And they did offload a lot of it right before 2008. They were offloading hundreds of thousands of acres because we all know what was happening. It was basically just a free-for-all in terms of building and mortgages. We all know what happened after 2008 or during 2008. They haven't really released more than 500 acres a year since 2008. And part of it is essentially bureaucracy. A lot of the private sector is saying that the BLM is just not very good at sort of moving at the pace of the private sector and offering land at fair market value. I think last year the land that was offered was about $300,000 an acre.
How does that compare to the cost of land for housing in other parts of the valley, the non-federally owned land?
It's really high. It's not fair market value. And so
okay,
the
so
problem
$300,000 an acre is what? That's like double the price of other land, or?
One, it's high. It's not too high, but the other problem is that the stipulations that the feds have is that if you want to buy some land from the feds, you have to nominate a parcel, and then you have to basically wait a year and then bid on that land. And then if you get that land, you basically have to pay for all of that land within 180 days. You got to put 20% down right away. So the private sector doesn't work like this. They're very speculative, especially on the commercial side, more than residential. They'll buy land and they'll wait till they get their financing in order. They'll wait till get all their permits, and then they'll start building homes or industrial spec or stuff like that. But the feds haven't been able to really sort of update their policies or the procedures or their planning for so long. So now it's basically the feds say, hey, we have all this land, and the private sector saying, we don't want to buy it because it doesn't pencil in and we'll just lose money if we try to get it. So you kind of have this, I don't know if you call that a catch-22 or between a rock and a hard place. So that's sort of where we're at right now.
The Las Vegas Academy of the Arts, or LVA, is a 12-time Grammy Award-winning high school, the most of any high school in the nation. And the LVA Music Conservatory faculty are performing in a special fundraising concert on Monday, April 20th at 6 p.m. in the Loudon Theater. Mark your calendars. The goal is to raise $50,000 for a 9-foot Steinway Model D concert grand piano. Their existing concert piano is beyond repair, and this opportunity is due to a partnership with Southern Nevada Music. There are multiple ways to support. You can attend the concert, you can donate, there's even a silent auction, and you don't have to actually go to the concert to donate or participate in the silent auction. There's some very cool things you can bid on, including a live local caroling event. You can get the mariachi band to come perform for you, get a jazz song dedication. What a great gift. And my personal favorite, you could actually, on stage, guest conduct one of their orchestra performances. So visit www.lasvegasacademy.net to purchase tickets, donate, access the silent auction, and support LVA students. Every ticket, donation, and bid brings us one step closer to giving these talented students the instruments they deserve. It seems like the federal bureaucracy isn't really ready for this kind of unique situation of Las Vegas, right? Where there's a lot of commercial housing development that wants to come in, but that's not typically the situation in other parts of the country.
The best way I always look at it is that we're considered a Sunbelt city. And what happened coming out of the pandemic was essentially there was a massive housing boom. Prices went up, rents went up. But what happened in sort of Austin, places in Texas, Florida, Atlanta, Phoenix, was they just built their way out of the problem, right? It was a building frenzy. With all of this influx in people that are moving to these cities, they were able to just basically build. And it kept housing down, it kept rents down. We weren't able to do that because the home builders could only get access to a certain specific amount of land. So we really didn't build our way out of this problem like other Sunbelt cities. And therefore now, our housing prices are as high as they've ever been. Cost of living is up, rent is up. And then on top of that, we've had, a pretty clear downturn the last couple of years or year and a half now economically. So it's kind of a perfect storm that's hitting Las Vegas right now.
And so this 1998 law that you'd mentioned, I think I've heard it referred to as SNPLMA. As I understand it, because we've done some reporting on this before too, the way it works is that local officials are sort of able to bargain with the feds and say, hey, if we can get some of this federal land for, say, development, we'll go ahead and protect some of this other land and make sure that it stays pristine and natural.
So Congress passed this back in 1998. And the idea was exactly what you said, was that we're going to offload this land to the private sector. And then maybe you guys can give us some land for more parks or more, things like Red Rock Canyon. I don't think anybody in their right mind wants to see our beautiful parkland in and around Las Vegas go to the private sector for housing developments. The problem is what we were talking about previously is all these little Tetris pieces and these little infill development parcels that are sitting in and around within the disposal boundary that this act was supposed to offload. And for whatever reason, sadly, it's just been bureaucracy. They just haven't been able to offload it at the speed of the private sector.
Okay.
The other problem is that if you get this land, if you try to get it from the feds, it then goes to the county and the municipality. And as we all know, Henderson's really good. North Las Vegas is really good. City of Las Vegas. But they all sort of have their own issues as well, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes there'll be land now that's sitting, say, in the city of Las Vegas or in Clark County that's prime for residential development. There's 10 acres that would be perfect for a bunch of homes, but it's zoned commercial. And good luck getting that changed to residential. Also within a county, you've got things like how many homes that you can put on per square acre. And if you want to pencil in homes these days, you got to build them small, you got to build them tight, and then you're going to basically build affordable starter homes, which is what Las Vegas needs. Las Vegas doesn't need more Summerlin mansions.
Yeah.
We don't need more $700,000 to $1 million homes. We need starter homes for $300,000 to get people into the market, get that first home so they can build that equity, build that generational wealth. And that's always been the starter home for Americans, is they get into that, they use that equity, and they go up the ladder. Yeah.
Do you have a sense of when new housing comes to the Valley, how much of that is actually starter homes and how much of that is sort of like luxury development? Do you have a breakdown by chance?
Well, I can tell you right now is that they are building starter homes, but they're not building enough, because the only thing that are, like I said, that are penciling in right now are the more expensive homes.
When you say that penciling in, you mean the only things that are actually profitable for developers is...
If there's 10 acres and the developer looks at it and says, the only way that I can make money on this is if I build, 3 $700,000 homes as opposed to 10 $300,000 homes. I mean, that's crude math, but developers are saying, well, okay, if I was going to build here, I'd build those 3 $700,000 homes, right? Because I know I could probably get 3 buyers easier than I could get 5 or 10 buyers, right? So it's sort of basic. Everything in economics always goes back to supply and demand. The other thing that I think people don't necessarily talk about enough is sort of multifamily apartment supply. I live down here in the Southwest, and basically coming out of the pandemic, the only thing that really penciled in for them was building luxury apartments. The problem is that they're too expensive for a lot of people. And when people are rent burdened, so let's say that your rent's too high, and you're just kind of living paycheck to paycheck, the last thing on your mind is getting into a starter home.
When it comes to federal lands and building on federal lands or pushing out into the outskirts of Las Vegas, I think there's been some pushback by entities like the Sierra Club, for example, about sprawl, right? Like, is this actually good for the valley environmentally? As the city gets wider and wider, are we encroaching on natural lands? Are we encroaching on natural environment? Are we extending the infrastructure in ways that overdraw on our water supply? What's the answer you're hearing to that? What's the response to that?
Well, the smartest guy to talk to about this would be Nicholas Irwin at UNLV. He's one of sort of the housing policy guys there.
Yeah, we've had him on the show before, actually. Not about this topic, but something else. Yeah.
He's very pro-sprawl, but I will sort of prefix this with the fact that there's no way that we could have a sprawl problem in Las Vegas because you can't just build out into the desert. If you don't have electricity, you're not building a house out there. So for us to build and sprawl, we'd have to build out this underlying infrastructure, which is really, really expensive and takes a lot of time. And you can't just build out really quickly. Phoenix is sort of an example of what happens when you have sprawl. And that's sort of a completely different story. They went and built all of this underlying infrastructure so they could sprawl out because they owned all of their land. And they just went to the developers and said, build, go ahead, do whatever you want. For us to sprawl out like that, it wouldn't work. And the other thing is that I do think that it's a different age and time now. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. What I would worry about is just the fact that it seems like the bureaucracy at the federal level in terms of this land that could be developed has basically just broken.
Okay. So if Vegas can no longer build out, why can't it build up?
That's a great question. I'm actually working on a story about that right now. So everything falls under the International Building Code. And basically, when you go over 3 stories, it gets exponentially more expensive. One, you need, obviously, elevators. Elevators are not cheap. And as I'm sure you and everybody listening knows, elevators break down all the time. You need more fire sprinkler systems. You also need more parking. You need to build either underground parking or you need adequate parking for all of this. So the problem is that if you go over 3 stories, you need more money. And if you need more money, you need to build units that are going to pay those rates. So you need people with high income jobs.
Okay.
So we're most likely not going to see a lot of high rises come up. Obviously, like Symphony Park is a great example of how you can do it when it's done right within sort of a real urban core. Speaking to sort of experts and people at Colliers and all the commercial real estate guys, they say 3 stories, 4 stories max is going to be the way that we can go. And that's not that bad. Like, you can still build a multifamily complex that's 4 stories and still have a couple hundred residents within half a block radius. So it's not the end of the world that we don't have high rises. Some people don't like them at all, but I don't think it's something we necessarily need to do. We just need to be in control of our own fate. And right now we're not. So
I guess what I'm trying to understand is you mentioned a lot of like some of the federal policies that have created a roadblock to building on federal land. But what about local policies in Las Vegas or even statewide? Are they keeping pace with population growth or are they part of the problem?
It kind of depends on where you are. I don't know if you've driven up through North Las Vegas recently, but they're building lots. Yeah, they're building lots of homes up there.
Okay.
And that's because the municipality has taken sort of a pro-development strategy. Henderson was kind of like that up until recently. Now they're being much more deliberate. But I think the county is a different story. I think the bureaucracy there is definitely an issue. And I'm just saying this as from what I hear from the private sector, is that it's difficult to get permits. It's difficult to get projects greenlit. It's difficult to move things along at sort of a proper pace. The other problem is that I did a story about this on BLM rights of way. So if you want to build over, say, a street, but the federal government owns the land underneath that street, you need a permit to do that. And right now, the waiting time for that is upwards of 3 years.
Wow.
And it's sort of a case study of how not to build a city. You know, you should build a city on a municipal level, right? Because that's where the demand is. That's where the best feedback is. But Las Vegas's problem is trying to build on a federal level. And as we all know, the federal government, it has its purpose and it's very good at doing some things, but as anybody will say, it's very slow, it's very bureaucratic, and it doesn't necessarily respond to municipal, county, or state demands very quickly. It's of note, you know, Utah is kind of in the same problem. They have 70% of their land is owned by the feds, and they recently sued the federal government to try to get control of their land. The Supreme Court didn't end up hearing it, but that's a sort of indication of where the only other counterpart that we have is that they got so upset with it, they tried suing the government.
Wow. Yeah, good luck. And also, speaking of bureaucratic long processes, that's another long one. I guess that's my question, though. Like, really, like, what is the solve here? I mean, and you're not talking about Las Vegas trying to buy up, as you mentioned, like public lands or Red Rock Canyon on the outskirts of Las Vegas. You're talking about these patches of land, that Tetris blocks within the valley. What's the solve here to having our county or our cities, our municipalities getting access to that land? Is there a solve?
Yeah, the solve is pretty simple. It's get Congress to enforce this act that we talked about, the Southern Nevada Public Lands, SNPLMA. Okay. But that, you know, that's easier said than done. There is a new BLM director. I believe his name is Stephen Pierce. He's sort of up for nomination in the Senate. I'm not sure when he comes in, but he's very pro-development. So he may sort of move some levers on a federal level and just sort of say, we're just going to offload all of this land to the county, the municipalities, and you guys can do what you want with it. But the problem is that this has been an issue since previous to 1998. The reason that they passed this back in 1998 was the private sector is like, we really need that land. And, you know, 1998 is a pretty long time from now. So I don't necessarily know what the solution is or what will happen. And I'm always super hesitant to forecast.
Sure.
But I do think that it will get to the point where enough people will sort of start to get upset and it might become like a political issue for candidates, maybe not in this midterm, maybe in the next presidential election, maybe in the next state election. I know Governor Lombardo has talked about this. I know some Democrats have also talked about it. It seems like it's a nonpartisan issue, but anybody's guess is as good as mine as to what actually happens here. So.
Well, we know that you're going to be on top of it no matter what. So, Patrick, we'll be reading your reporting and looking forward to it. Thanks so much for joining us on CityCast Las Vegas today.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all for today here on CityCast Las Vegas. If you enjoyed the show, go tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. Don't forget you can support this show and get some great perks by becoming a CityCast Las Vegas neighbor at membership.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Take care.